Hello and good evening. The United Nations Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change has sounded out a code red for humanity, saying drastic action is required by the entire world to stave off the disasters waiting in the wings due to the rising pollution and overexploitation of the Earth's resources. We'll get you more on this on Newsnight tonight. I'm Gautam Roy. We'll also be talking about how India put the issue of maritime security center stage today as Prime Minister Narendra Modi chaired an open UN Security Council debate on enhancing international cooperation on maritime security. But first, our headlines. Prime Minister Narendra Modi becomes the first Prime Minister presiding over UN Security Council open debate on maritime security from India. Top leaders such as Antony Blinken and Russian President Vladimir Putin participate. The PM says sea routes are being misused, outlines 5 principles for evolving maritime cooperation framework. UNSC adopts presidential statement on maritime security proposed by India. Top leaders participate in the discussion. President Vladimir Putin says Russia stands for strict observance of key norms and principles of international law fixed in the UN Charter. US Secretary of State Antony Blinken calls for freedom of navigation and overflight, asserts maritime security is in a serious danger, especially in the South China Sea. Prime Minister releases 9th installment of PM Kisan, more than 19,500 crore rupees transferred directly into the accounts of over 9.75 crore beneficiary farmer families. Says small farmers are now being given utmost priority in the agricultural policies of the country. The UN Climate Panel sounds out a dire warning, says greenhouse gases already high enough to guarantee climate disruption for decades. Unless action is taken, average global temperature will likely cross 1.5 degrees Celsius warming threshold within the next 20 years. Agricultural and ecological droughts expected to increase in Asian subcontinent. Nation led by Sports Minister Anurag Thakur welcomes back Indian contingent from Tokyo, lauds many firsts at Tokyo, congratulates players for overcoming all COVID challenges. Says the Prime Minister's personal touch provided motivating force for all involved in India's Olympic campaign. Logjam in Parliament persists, but the government responds on the Pegasus issue in a written reply to a question in the Rajya Sabha. Says the Ministry of Defence has not had any transaction with NSO Group Technologies, which sells the spyware. In a positive development, the government opens up vaccination for foreign nationals. They are now eligible for jabs in India and can register on the CoWIN portal using their passports. And Afghan forces hit back against the Taliban. Defense Ministry says Afghan forces have killed 16 Taliban insurgents in the Kandahar province. But first up, Prime Minister Narendra Modi chaired a high-level open debate at the United Nations Security Council on enhancing maritime security, a case for international cooperation. This happened on Monday, of course, through a video link. He outlined 5 principles for inclusive maritime security framework and mentioned India's vision on the issue called Sagar. The UNSC also adopted the presidential statement on maritime security proposed by India. This is the first time an Indian Prime Minister has chaired an open debate at the UNSC after India assumed the UNSC presidency for the month of August.
समंदर हमारी साझा धरोहर है। हमारे समुद्री रास्ते इंटरनेशनल ट्रेड की लाइफलाइन है। ये समंदर हमारे प्लेनेट के भविष्य के लिए बहुत महत्वपूर्ण है। लेकिन हमारी इस साझा समुद्री धरोहर को आज कई प्रकार की चुनौतियों का सामना करना पड़ता है। पायरेसी और आतंकवाद के लिए समुद्री रास्तों का दुरुपयोग हो रहा है। अनेक देशों के बीच मैरीटाइम डिस्प्यूट्स हैं। और क्लाइमेट चेंज तथा प्राकृतिक आपदाएं भी मैरीटाइम डोमेन से जुड़े विषय हैं।
A historic day for India and the United Nations Security Council. Prime Minister Narendra Modi chairing an open debate titled Enhancing Maritime Security, a case for international cooperation after India assumed the UNSC presidency for the month of August. The first Indian Prime Minister to do so. PM Modi laid stress on coming up with ways to effectively tackle maritime crime and other security challenges apart from conserving oceanic resources and guarding them against pollution, be it plastic or oil spills. The meeting was attended by several heads of state or government, top ministers and officials, including Russian President Vladimir Putin and US Secretary of State Antony Blinken. PM used the occasion to underline the need for a global framework to conserve and utilize common maritime heritage. Removal of barriers to legitimate maritime trade based on India's vision of Sagar, security and growth for all.
भारत ने इसी खुले और इंक्लूसिव एथोस के आधार पर सागर, सिक्योरिटी एंड ग्रोथ फॉर ऑल इन द रीजन का विजन परिभाषित किया है.
Peaceful resolution of maritime disputes based on international laws, collectively combat all maritime threats posed by non-state actors and environmental disasters.
साइक्लोन, सुनामी और प्रदूषण संबंधित समुद्री आपदाओं में हम फर्स्ट रिस्पॉन्डर रहे हैं. हिंद महासागर में भारत की भूमिका एक नेट सिक्योरिटी प्रोवाइडर के रूप में रही है. हमें ओशन साइंस में भी सहयोग बढ़ाना चाहिए. भारत ने एक महत्वाकांक्षी डीप ओशन मिशन लॉन्च किया है.
Need to conserve maritime resources and environment. Need to encourage responsible maritime connectivity. Russian President Vladimir Putin suggested setting up a special structure under the UN system to directly deal with the issue of fighting maritime crime in different regions.
Russia also wants to build productive cooperation with the Indian Ocean Rim Association and the Indian Ocean Commission. Undoubtedly, we aim to help ensure security in the area of the Persian Gulf. We should think about establishing a special structure within the UN system that would directly deal with the issue of fighting maritime crime in various regions. This structure should be based on the support of the UN member states and actively engage experts, representatives of civil society, academia, and private sector.
US Secretary of State Antony Blinken emphasized the need for all member states to adhere to international treaties and abide by the verdicts of international tribunals in case of maritime disputes. He specifically mentioned the territorial disputes related to the South China Sea.
When nations ignore or purport to redraw the borders of other nations, whether by land or by sea, they undermine the sovereign equality of member states, a guiding principle of the United Nations. Non-state actors also pose serious risk to maritime safety and security. Yet, our collective response to these actors shows how effective we can be when we work together to defend maritime order and hold those accountable who violate it.
Clearly, maritime security has its challenges. It is all the more important for India and like-minded countries to come together and safeguard everyone's rights and resources. 75% of world's maritime trade passes through the Indian Ocean, including 50% of daily global oil supply. India has large stake in ensuring maritime security and put the issue at center stage in the world's top global security body. Bureau Report, DD India.
And that brings up our In Focus tonight, which is all about UNSC debate. The PM lays down 5 principles for maritime security framework. And to talk about it, we have Vice Admiral Shekhar Sinha with us, retired former Chief of Integrated Defence Staff, and Professor WPS Sandhu also joins us. He's from the Center of Global Affairs, New York University. First, if I could ask you, Vice Admiral Sinha, in terms of what was stated today by the Prime Minister himself, in terms of the principles that he laid down and the submissions by others as well who were there as part of this debate, this open debate on maritime security, what kind of issues do you think did they identify that need to be immediately addressed as far as maritime security is concerned?
Thank you, Gautam, for getting me on this newscast. It's very significant to say the least, because this is the first time that Indian Prime Minister has opened the debate, for the world leaders to discuss. And the 5 principles that he has talked about is fundamental to the Indian Ocean, the maritime strategy that we follow. And very similar, bases are being used for the Indo-Pacific and the Indian Ocean, the security. He has mentioned about 5 challenges, Gautam. First, he has talked about piracy. Then he has talked about the maritime terrorism and using the sea for passage of this, terror outfits. Thirdly, he's talked about, the maritime disputes, which was subsequently clarified by Secretary Blinken by saying that his named South China Sea.
Yes.
Next one is talked about the natural disaster, and lastly, the climate change. Now, if you look at it, Gautam, none of these can be taken care by one country or 2 countries. And therefore, a collective, force has to be applied. And wherever it happens, the nominated countries and their warships should go and attend to these issues. But of all these, the one which is very important that he has talked about is the legal dispute, though he hasn't said it in those many words. But subsequently, the Russian president very clearly mentioned that the disputes must be resolved as per the international law.
Yes.
And free and open sea has been spoken by the Prime Minister. Inclusive has been spoken by the Prime Minister. So that means that it does not leave out anybody. So that's a very broad framework. And if it is accepted, Gautam, I think we are looking for a very larger sort of framework, and China possibly will have to come around to accept, the proposal which has been made regarding sorting out the disputes as per the existing law. So I think it is very significant what we have been discussing in the context of Indian Ocean, what we have been discussing in the context of Indo-Pacific. Now it is at World Forum. And I think it's a very, very important development which is taking place, Gautam.
Okay. If I could bring you in, Professor Sandhu, what do you make of what the Prime Minister also said about responsible maritime connectivity? That is an issue that he seems to have flagged as well, that again concerns China.
Absolutely. And I think the idea of this initiative really has been to try and move away from some of the differences, particularly interstate differences, and sort of focus on the other areas, particularly related to non-state actors, but also cooperative elements, which might be beneficial for all the countries involved. And that, I think, was a key element of this whole exercise as well.
Right. And in terms of, again, these issues of cooperation, it is largely concerned with maritime security related to international crime that, of course, is connected, is everyone's concern. And that is something that there can be no dispute or debate about, really, Vice Admiral Sinha. Is that something that, everyone would have common ground with?
Quite right, Gautam. It is going to be common ground because, at the moment, sea still provides the cheapest mode of transportation. And it is not for any other reason that the terror outfits use this, the cheaper mode of transportation and lesser regime of regulation that, this is being misused. So I think that this has got a very important implication in the coming days. And the cooperation that Professor Sandhu has very rightly pointed out, that unless we cooperate with each other, unless we make it free and open sea, we should not have any restriction. That's what the Prime Minister talked about, because it is good for global commons. and anything which threatens the global commons in achieving, towards the prosperity of people, then it should be a collective wisdom. And I'm sure that if it passes the muster this time, they will break this, entire oceanic area into small sections and make the countries, 3, 4 countries or 5 countries responsible for addressing these issues. And if it cannot be addressed, then possibly come back to the International Court of Justice. So I think it is binding, it will become a binding arrangement amongst all the countries, all the seafaring countries, and it will be good. Open and free and open sea, we have been talking about for a long time. And
Yes.
that is where, the China will get pinned down. So let us see how does China accept this, and how does China, go about cooperating and saying yes to all that is being proposed. Gautam.
Well, certainly, if I could bring in Professor Sidhu on that. Professor Sidhu, if you could just tell us in terms of how China has, so far reacted to such calls for respecting international laws, and place that in the context of also how it has come under increased pressure over the origins of the entire coronavirus outbreak as well. What kind of a stand do you think China will take now?
Gautam, thank you very much for that. Let me make sort of 3 points here, and I'll come to the the key question that you raised about China as well. First of all, I think India and the Indian Prime Minister actually chairing this session shows that India is now looking at this issue at the highest level. That's very important. Also, the fact that India is now willing to show leadership at the global level on this aspect is something which is very, very important, so that it's not just the Navy or the Foreign Service, but really at the highest level. The second is, I think it's also a very good start that we have a unanimous presidential statement. But what would have been even better, and perhaps this is something that India might think about in the next round of its presidency in December next year, is actually a Security Council resolution related to maritime security. Third, it's also quite clear that it has a lot of support of the UN Security Council members, but the presence, particularly of the heads of states, could also be improved. While it's very impressive to have 3 heads of state, the president of Russia, of Kenya, and Vietnam, as well as several foreign ministers, I think the next time it could also be stepped up to an important level, although it must be recognized that Africa was very well represented. This brings me to your question about China. As you know, these statements are very much negotiated in advance, and this was negotiated earlier last week, and it comes at a very timely moment when you also have the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change report, which you referred to right in the beginning, talking about the challenge of maritime security as well. But the statement, there were 2 objections which are posed by China. One of them related to illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing. And the second related to a call by the statement to ask the UN Secretary General to present a report on maritime security to the UN Security Council. So this shows that China is willing to go some part of the way, but will certainly be very opposed when you raise the issue of interstate tensions. As you saw, the Chinese representative, who was really at the lowest level among all those present, countered Secretary Blinken's assertion of China's role in the South China Sea. So that's an element that India will have to maneuver as it tries to get greater cooperation on this issue going forward.
I think the most pressing issue right now is what was spoken of in the context of maritime security, which is conservation of our oceanic resources, the shared oceanic resources, where I think the matter is acquiring a lot of a sense of urgency as well in the context of the kind of report that we've got from the MPCC as well, and things will perhaps come to a head in Glasgow, and where we can see everyone perhaps come together and move forward on it and do something really positive and decisive, which speaks for the kind of serious action that everyone wants to take on combating climate change. Is that a possibility now, Vice Admiral Sinha?
Very much, because this is absolutely non-controversial point where everybody will agree. And as you know that some areas have been allotted for the deep sea mining and looking at how is the ecology under the sea, how is the life of other sort of sea animals, if you like, and how it can be preserved. But here also, the Chinese will have to do a lot of soul searching, because those artificial structures that they have made, it has been at the cost of destroying a lot of ecosystem under the South China Sea. So I think if this passes the muster and some resolution comes, as Professor Sidhu is saying, maybe in the next meeting, I wouldn't be surprised that some of the resolutions might get passed at the end of 1 month, because as he said that, it is already discussed. So once where there is a complete convergence of ideas, convergence of the final draft, I think at least those should be promulgated so that we can start working in the direction in the future. As you know that we already have the deep ocean mission of the government of India in the maritime sector, and a lot of work is happening on that. We don't get to know the Department of the oceanography is handling this, and we have always said conserve, utilize the the resources in a manner that you don't destroy the system, and it should be enough for you to still extract very large numbers of they got mines and minerals, and you have the hydrocarbons and so many other things, the nuggets, they are all there. But if you don't have a regulated sort of extraction, then some countries might just overuse this area. They might infringe into your areas, those who do not have the scientific ability of extracting those underwater resources, then there can be problem for the future. So I think that, achievable, but I think we'll have to take China on board, because we have a lot of answering to do, Gautam.
Certainly. And Professor Sidhu, where do you think is the role of modern technology in all this in terms of addressing all these challenges, be it of territory or be it of addressing or policing these sea lanes? Is that something that is being collectively looked at in terms of the use of resources in space and otherwise all kinds of technology that we now have at our disposal?
Gautam, that's an excellent point, because in fact, and I'm sure Admiral will agree with me, that the one area where in fact you're seeing the highest movement of technology, particularly autonomous systems, is actually in the oceans, particularly among the global commons, partly because of the kind of challenges in trying to exploit some of the resources in the depths that they are, because simply put, humans actually cannot perform or survive there for a long duration of time. So in fact, technology is going to play a very, very important role in this endeavor and in this context as well. And that's something that, again, the fact that India has flagged that as something that they may want to cooperate with others is really crucial, not just for India, but also for other countries which are very interested in the peaceful development of their economies through the common use of the oceanic resources without causing the kind of ecological and climate damage that we are all very concerned about. So I would say, right from humanitarian assistance to disaster relief, to mapping, to subsequent exploration and exploitation of the material, technology is going to be very, very critical, as it is going to be in almost every other aspect, be it communication, as well as, sadly, conflict or even countering piracy as well. So you can see the whole gamut of technologies emerging and existing come into play in that context.
And do we see in fact things evolving on that front as well, in terms of nations coming together and putting their technological resources as well to work collectively, or is it going to be still as it is, nations almost getting the feeling that technology is basically being used to spy on one another? Vice Admiral Sinha.
Gautam, I think you have hit the nail on the head. What Professor Sidhu was talking about. He mentioned a very important thing called the technology. The sea areas for exploitation has already been marked for various countries, depending upon where they are located and how they are located. But if the technology is not shared, Gautam, then you will have a situation where countries who want to exploit it, they will need the technology and they will rent it out to some other country which will overexploit and take larger than its own share. And they will make the other global commons, those who don't have technology, to live with some very small amounts of resources. So I think it is extremely important, as you mentioned, extremely important to share the technology, and in that the bigger countries or the scientifically more advanced countries will have to part with, or they will have to do some co-development along with the countries of the global commons who are not as capable, scientifically not as advanced. So I think that this is going to derive the future. The second important point he made, Professor Sidhu, is the mapping. Underwater mapping and hydrological mapping are very important issue. And sharing that data is very important. Right now, there are countries who are mapping. They are mapping even in no waters, but they're not sharing the data.
Right.
So that is not on, because the sea is meant for everybody's use. Beyond 12 nautical miles or beyond EEZ, it belongs to global commons. You can freely move here and there, but unfortunately, it is not happening. So ultimately, it will come down to the broader framework of maritime security, in which all these aspects will be inclusive. And to agree, agreement amongst all the countries is not going to be all that easy. As he mentioned that, Chinese representative has already sort of opposed to a couple of points that he made. And I'm sure that when it is represented by slightly higher level, people like the Foreign Minister Wang Yi and all that, then you will find even more stronger rebuttal to some of the points which have been made. So I think that this is just the beginning, but I'm glad that what we have been talking about in our own forums in Indian Ocean or Indo-Pacific in most of the seminars and sometimes on your own program, now it is becoming a global issue for the first time.
Yeah.
It is maritime security's dimension has been made worldwide, and Prime Minister is very right in saying it is for global commerce prosperity and everybody has equal right. So that actually points at number of things. It points at technology, it points at legal framework, it talks, piracy and the architecture. He also talks about the architecture. So the architecture should be, UN should decide as to what kind of architecture. UN means who? Countries like you, them, us, all those countries.
Certainly.
So they will have to have some, joint working groups of various countries who will address these issues, the 5 principles that the Prime Minister has put across. And if it is broadly agreed in principle that yes, we agree that these 5 things need to be addressed, then you will soon see that joint working group probably, framed during the presidency of India. Otherwise, if it is some other country, maybe the Americans will do it. But if the presidency comes to China, then I'm sure that you will find a lot of difficulties about that.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, India would like to take everyone along on this subject, not just the majority or like-minded countries, as these terms are used, because India has a large responsibility here. The kind of Indian Ocean resources that just lay beyond our international waters, they're huge, and the littoral countries are so many. And if they come together, the more, the better, the more secure will the entire world be, because a lot of the trade, oceanic trade that runs for the entire world, 75% of it goes through Indian Ocean's waters, and the oil itself, which is a lifeline, is about 50% or more, isn't it, Professor Sidhu?
Absolutely, and that's an important sort of contribution again that we need to keep in mind, and which is why I think the fact that we had the African Union represented at the highest level there, even though formally they're not a member of the Security Council, was a very crucial messaging on the part of India to say that it's willing to work with with the countries of Africa for their development, for the benefit from the oceans, because most of them are littoral states. And in fact, even in the Security Council today, 14 of the 15 members are littoral states,
Yes.
with the exception being Niger. So I think that's an important element to take along and build a consensus to make sure that you can have the biggest buy-in from the largest number of not just Security Council members, but also the UN General Assembly. And to make your point, I think it would be very important for India. This is a very good start, but it should not end here. India needs to now show the same leadership in other fora, including the G20, for example, the BRICS, as well as other forums, and of course the Indian Ocean Rim Association, among others as well as the General Assembly. So I think, it's got to be an all-pronged response to take this whole initiative forward to show that India can indeed be a leader on a very crucial issue of global importance and lead the way.
Certainly, and very soon India will be taking up two other key issues as well, counterterrorism and peacekeeping, and we'll see similar measures being taken there as well, and proposals being put forth, and we can hope to get some positive movement on them. If not in this month, then again when India once again gets the presidency before its 2-year term in the Security Council ends. Thanks a lot for joining us this evening to talk about it, both Sera Saab and of course Professor Sidhu Wisdom. Well, let's move on now as nations across the globe battle wildfires, try to wade through floods and fight nature's fury. The UN Climate Panel has issued a clear and dire warning. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change has said that the dangerous concoction of global warming with high levels of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere is driving the Earth on the edge, and unless immediate, rapid and large-scale action is taken to reduce emissions, the results will be catastrophic.
Even as wildfires rage in Greece, Bolivia and California, and Venice's St. Mark's Square was flooded twice over the weekend, the latest Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, or IPCC, report provides new estimates of the chances of crossing the global warming level of 1.5 degrees Celsius in the next decades. It finds that unless there are immediate, rapid and large-scale reductions in greenhouse gas emissions, limiting warming to close to 1.5 degrees Celsius or even 2 degrees Celsius will be beyond reach. The report shows that emissions of greenhouse gases from human activities are responsible for nearly 1.1 degrees Celsius of warming since 1850-1900, and finds that averaged over the next 20 years, global temperature is expected to reach or exceed 1.5 degrees Celsius of warming. For 1.5 degrees Celsius of global warming, there will be increasing heat waves, longer warm seasons and shorter cold seasons. At 2 degrees Celsius of global warming, heat extremes would more often reach critical tolerance thresholds for agriculture and health.
We stop warming at 1.5 degrees, then we will also stop many of these extremes from getting worse. And I think that, and while we are committed to some changes, particularly sea level rise, glacier melt, still to come for many decades, we can slow these changes down, and we can stop many of the others from getting worse by urgently and drastically reducing CO2 emissions in the next decade.
But it is not just about temperature. Climate change is bringing multiple different changes in different regions, which will all increase with further warming. These include changes to wetness and dryness, to winds, snow and ice, coastal areas and oceans.
That is really important to highlight just how much more frequent and more intense heat waves are getting basically everywhere. So the combination of hot and dry and windy weather conditions has increased. And also another type of compound events that is becoming a lot more frequent and intense are compound flooding. So
for the Indian subcontinent, the report stated, the observed mean surface temperature increase has clearly emerged out of the range of internal variability compared to 1850-1900. Heat extremes have increased while cold extremes have decreased, and these trends will continue over the coming decades. Average and heavy precipitation will also increase over much of Asia. It added, agricultural and ecological droughts are also expected to increase in the subcontinent. India is well on track to achieve its Paris Agreement targets well before the target date of 2030. India has voluntarily committed to reducing greenhouse gas emission intensity of its GDP by 33 to 35% below 2005 levels by 2030. Bureau Report, DD India.
Now, smarting under the onslaught of the Taliban, which has been taking key cities such as Kunduz and Sarepul, and the Afghan defense forces have now hit back hard in Kandahar. Kabul has claimed that the Afghan forces have killed at least 16 Taliban terrorists with the help of the Air Force. Here are the details.
A beleaguered Afghan government hit back against the Taliban. On Monday, Afghanistan's defense ministry said that 16 Taliban insurgents were killed by Afghan forces backed by the Air Force in Kandahar province. This even as the Taliban completed pushing out Afghan forces from Kunduz and Saripul. The Afghan Interior Ministry spokesperson said on Monday Taliban attacks were continuing in several locations, but Afghan security and defense forces were repelling them and that the enemy had suffered heavy casualties.
Enemy attacks continue in cities of Kunduz, Shebergan, Samangan, Sarepul. Still, fortunately, Afghan security and defense forces are resisting them. We have made progress in Kunduz and other cities, and the enemy has suffered heavy casualties. Due to the pressure on the enemy, they have focused on cities of Mazar and Pole Komri, but fortunately, we have strong security lines there, and there is resistance against the enemy. So far, the enemy has suffered heavy casualties.
A video posted on Afghan government's defense ministry Facebook showed airstrikes on fields in the province. The ministry said in a statement that 6 other Taliban were wounded in 8 hideouts, 3 motorcycles and some amount of their weapons and ammunition were destroyed on Sunday. Taliban insurgents have taken dozens of districts and border crossings in recent months and put pressure on several provincial capitals, including Herat in the west and Kandahar in the south, as foreign troops withdraw. Bureau Report, DD India.
Back home, Prime Minister Narendra Modi released the next installment of funds under Pradhan Mantri Kisan Samman Nidhi scheme on Monday. The PM spoke about the sowing season on the occasion and expressed the hope that the amount transferred will help the farmers. He also mentioned that the scheme of Kisan Infrastructure Fund with 1 lakh crore rupees corpus has also completed 1 year today while interacting with farmer beneficiaries.
Taking forward his government's commitment to farmers' welfare, Prime Minister Narendra Modi released the next installment of financial benefit under Pradhan Mantri Kisan Samman Nidhi or PM Kisan through video conference. This enabled the transfer of an amount of more than Rs 19,500 crores to more than 9.75 crores beneficiary farmer families. It was the 9th installment of the financial benefit under Pradhan Mantri Kisan Samman Nidhi. He also interacted with farmer beneficiaries during the event. The Prime Minister said that while drawing up agricultural policies, top priority is being given to small farmers.
बीते सालों में छोटे किसानों को सुविधा और सुरक्षा देने का एक गंभीर प्रयास किया जा रहा है। पीएम किसान सम्मान निधि के तहत अब तक 1,60,000 करोड़ रुपए किसानों को दिए गए हैं। इसमें लगभग 1 लाख करोड़ रुपए तो कोरोना के मुश्किल समय में ही छोटे किसानों तक पहुंचे हैं। यही नहीं, कोरोना काल में ही 2 करोड़ से ज्यादा किसान क्रेडिट कार्ड जारी किए गए, जिनमें से अधिकतर छोटे किसान हैं।
The Prime Minister called for changes in the Indian agriculture according to the demands of changing times. He said it is time to give direction to India's agriculture to face new challenges and take advantage of new opportunities.
इस अवसर पर हमें ये तय करना है कि आने वाले 25 वर्षों में हम भारत को कहां देखना चाहते हैं। ये समय भारत की कृषि को एक ऐसी दिशा देने का है जो नई चुनौतियों का सामना कर सके और नए अवसरों का भरपूर लाभ उठा सके।
He lauded the farmers for record production during the pandemic and outlined the government's measures to reduce the hardships of farmers during the difficult period.
डीएपी जिसके दाम अंतर्राष्ट्रीय बाजार में इस कोरोना के चलते कई गुना बढ़ गए, उसका बोझ भी हमारी सरकार ने किसानों पर पड़ने नहीं दिया। सरकार ने तुरंत इसके लिए 12,000 करोड़ रुपए का इंतजाम किया। साथियों, सरकार ने खरीफ हो या रबी सीजन, किसानों से एमएसपी पर अब तक की सबसे बड़ी खरीद की है। इससे धान किसानों के खेतों में लगभग 1,70,000 करोड़ रुपए और गेहूं किसानों के खाते में लगभग 85,000 करोड़ रुपए डायरेक्ट पहुंचे हैं।
The Prime Minister highlighted National Edible Oil Mission Oil Palm as a pledge for achieving self-reliance in edible oil. Under the mission, more than 11,000 crore rupees will be invested in the cooking oil ecosystem. The Prime Minister also mentioned the Agriculture Infrastructure Fund and enumerated its benefits.
हाल में एक और बड़ा फैसला लेते हुए सरकार ने तय किया है कि जो राज्यों में हमारी सरकारी मंडियां हैं, उनको भी इस फंड से मदद मिल सके। इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर फंड हो या फिर 10,000 किसान उत्पादक संघों का निर्माण, कोशिश यही है कि छोटे किसानों की ताकत को बढ़ाया जाए।
For the first time, India has reached among the top 10 countries of the world in terms of agricultural exports. On the occasion, the Prime Minister assured the farmers of the country that the government will ensure that the farmers get every facility from quality seeds to technology. Bureau Report, DD India.
Well, the government put it on record on Monday that it has had no transaction with NSO Group's technologies, which has developed and sells the spyware Pegasus. This was mentioned in a written reply by MOS for Defence Ajay Bhatt to a question in the Rajya Sabha. Here's more on what happened in Parliament today on the first day of the last week of the monsoon session, most of which was lost due to the opposition's disruptions.
The first day of the last week of monsoon session of the Parliament, same scenes of sloganeering and ruckus in Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha. Due to uproar created by opposition members, proceedings in both the houses were disrupted several times. As a result, question hour could not be conducted. However, Lok Sabha passed some important bills amid the din, and in Rajya Sabha some important bills were passed after many opposition parties walked out of the house. Amid uproar by opposition parties on the issues of Pegasus spyware and farmers' protest, government informed the upper house that there has not been any transaction with NSO Group. Defence Ministry in a written reply informed the house about this. The information assumes importance because Pegasus software is a part of this group and the opposition parties have been attacking the government over this issue since the beginning of the monsoon session. The Rajya Sabha passed the Tribunals Reforms Bill 2021 amid opposition protest over Pegasus project report, farm laws and price rise. The bill that seeks to abolish many appellate tribunals set up under various acts was passed in Lok Sabha by voice vote without a debate amid the protest on August 3rd. Rajya Sabha also took up the Taxation Laws Amendment Bill 2021 with opposition, Congress, DMK and TMC staging a walkout. The upper house also passed a bill to set up a central university in Ladakh.
2,500 विद्यार्थियों को पढ़ाने लायक एक केंद्रीय विश्वविद्यालय की रचना सोची गई है। 750 करोड़ रुपया खर्चा करके व्यय करके ये विश्वविद्यालय बनने वाला है।
In Lok Sabha, 3 important bills were passed and some other bills were presented on the floor of the House. The Limited Liability Partnership Amendment Bill 2021, the Deposit Insurance and Credit Guarantee Corporation Amendment Bill 2021 and the Constitution Scheduled Tribes Order Amendment Bill 2021 were passed amid ruckus in the House. The Deposit Insurance and Credit Guarantee Corporation Amendment Bill 2021 will ensure bank deposits up to ₹5 lakh. Under DICGC Bill 2021, 98.3% of all deposits will get recovered.
This is a bill which is being brought in to benefit small depositors in cooperative banks. So I honestly appeal to all the members from all the parties to understand the importance of such a bill, which is being passed in the welfare, keeping the welfare of the small depositors in mind.
99% वहाँ ट्राइबल आबादी है, लेकिन नागा ट्राइब उनके रिकॉर्ड में होने के कारण उन्हें यह लाभ नहीं मिल पा रहा था। आज इस विधेयक के माध्यम से नागा ट्राइब को इलोबरेट करते हुए उनके रेवेन्यू रिकॉर्ड्स के आधार पर यह सुनिश्चित किया जा रहा है कि इस विधेयक के माध्यम से उन्हें लाभ मिले।
The National Commission for Homeopathy Amendment Bill 2021 and the National Commission for Indian System of Medicine Amendment Bill 2021 were introduced in the Lok Sabha amid the din. After the introduction of these two bills, Social Justice and Empowerment Minister Virendra Kumar introduced the Constitution 127th Amendment Bill 2021 in the Lok Sabha. The bill seeks to restore the state's power to make their own OBC list.
मैं तमाम पॉलिटिकल पार्टी से भी ये निवेदन करना चाहता हूँ कि वो सारी पॉलिटिकल पार्टीज जो अभी एक लॉकजाम तैयार करके बैठी हुई है, उन्होंने कम से कम ओबीसी के हितों के लिए और बैकवर्ड क्लासेस के हितों के लिए इसको समर्थन देना चाहिए और इसको एक मत से पारित करना चाहिए।
जो कानून गरीबों के हित में आता है और बैकवर्ड क्लास के हित में आता है, हम सारे लोग समर्थन करेंगे।
The government is making all efforts to expedite legislative business in the monsoon session of the parliament despite ruckus in both the houses. However, it is hope against hope that the deadlock would be over even in the last week of the monsoon session. With Rishi Kumar, Anuj Yadav and Shailendra Mishra, Bureau Report, DD India.
And now getting you our special segment on parliamentary questions. Well, today in Rajya Sabha, Minister for Information and Broadcasting, Anurag Singh Thakur, responded to a question on regulatory mechanism for content on the internet. In a written reply, the minister informed the Rajya Sabha that the content on the internet is governed by Information Technology Act 2000. The government has notified the Information Technology Rules 2021 under that act. After consultation with multiple stakeholders, Part 3 of these rules provide for a code of ethics to be followed by publishers of news and current affairs on digital media and by OTT platforms. Code of ethics for OTT platforms allows self-classification of content into age-based categories according to the guidelines provided by in the rules, while it requires them to not transmit any content prohibited under the law. Further, code of ethics to be followed by digital newspaper publishers is at par with content codes for traditional media platforms. Apart from this, concerns over content are to be addressed through a 3-tier grievance redressal mechanism. The publisher of the content constitutes the first tier. A self-regulating body by the publishers is at the second tier, while an oversight mechanism of the government forms the third tier of grievance redressal. Periodical information regarding grievance redressal is to be placed in public domain by the publishers. And today in the Lok Sabha, in a written reply to a question on rural tourism by member Queen Oja, the Minister of Tourism G. Kishan Reddy stated that the ministry has identified rural tourism as one of the niche tourism areas to be developed. Ministry of Tourism has launched the Swadesh Darshan scheme for development of 15 theme-based tourist circuits. Rural tourism circuit has potential of leveraging tourism as a force multiplier for revitalizing rural economy and giving both domestic and international tourists a glimpse of rural aspects of the country. The ministry has sanctioned the development of Gandhi circuit in Bihar, which includes Biti Harba, Chandrahiya and Turkolia, and the development of Malanar Malabar Cruise Tourism Project in Kerala. The ministry has also formulated a draft national strategy and roadmap for development of rural tourism in India, an initiative towards Atmanirbhar Bharat, and has invited suggestions from the government's various departments and industry stakeholders on the same. Now, a grand welcome was accorded to the winners of Tokyo Olympics in New Delhi. 3 union ministers felicitated the Tokyo Olympic medalists. Gold medalists in javelin, Neeraj Chopra, wrestler Ravi Kumar Dhaya, Bajrang Punia, boxer Lavlina Borgohain and the men's national hockey team attended the event where they were feted and hailed as champions.
It's been an evening like no other in the national capital as Olympic stars descended after their valiant heroics in Tokyo. The medalists Neeraj Chopra, Ravi Kumar Dahiya, Bajrang Punia, Lavlina Borgohain and the men's national hockey team attended a gala felicitation event in New Delhi. Youth Affairs and Sports Minister Anurag Singh Thakur, Law and Justice Minister Kiran Rijiju and Nisit Pramanik, Minister of State for Home Affairs, honoured the medalists who made the country proud at Tokyo Olympics. Tokyo 2020 was a huge success which came to an end on Sunday, where India ended at the 48th spot and returned with their best ever Olympic showing, winning as many as 7 medals, including 1 gold. Congratulating medalists, Union Minister Anurag Singh Thakur said that winners at Tokyo will remain an inspiration for generations to come. He said medalists are the new heroes of New India.
आपने आज के हिंदुस्तान के युवाओं के बीच में एक नई एस्पिरेशन खड़ी की, आशाएं आकांक्षाओं को बढ़ाने का आपने काम किया है और ये नया भारत जो है वो बहुत अलग सोचता है। इस न्यू इंडिया के लिए आप न्यू हीरोज हैं। राष्ट्रगान टोक्यो में बज रहा था, लेकिन 135 करोड़ भारतीयों का सिर गर्व के साथ हिंदुस्तान और दुनिया के अलग अलग देशों में ऊंचा हो रहा था।
हम लोग इतने हजारों किलोमीटर इतने दूर थे हिंदुस्तान में, लेकिन हम लोग का भी शरीर दर्द हो गया क्योंकि हम लोग भी खेल रहे थे आप लोग के साथ में जोश में, और पूरा सपोर्ट सुबह सुबह 5 बजे उठ करके, और प्रधानमंत्री जी से लेकर के हर एक बच्चे, गांव, शहर, हर एक कोने कोने पूरे भारतवर्ष में चीयर फॉर इंडिया कर रहे थे।
एक खिलाड़ी के लिए वो पल सबसे ज्यादा महत्वपूर्ण होता है, सबसे ज्यादा गर्व की होता है जब उनकी उत्तम प्रदर्शन के कारण से, उनकी उत्कृष्ट प्रदर्शन के कारण से देश की झंडा शान से लहराते हैं।
Players also shared their experience at Tokyo Olympics. Several highlights came out of Tokyo 2020 for India, starting with Neeraj Chopra, who won the historic gold for India in athletics by throwing 87.58 meters at the men's javelin throw finals. Not only is this independent India's first gold in athletics at the Olympics, but also the only medal ever by an Indian in athletics.
मैं सबसे पहले तो ये दिखाना चाहूंगा गोल्ड मेडल ये मेरा नहीं पूरे इंडिया का है, और मैं उस दिन से ही अपनी जेब में लेके घूम रहा हूँ मेडल को। मैं सही बताऊं तो उस दिन से सही तरह से सो नहीं पाए हैं, खा नहीं पाए हैं, लेकिन जब भी मैं एकदम इसको निकाल के देख लेता हूँ ऐसा लगता है कि यार सब ठीक है, कोई दिक्कत नहीं। कहीं ना कहीं ये था मन में कि यार बहुत तगड़े कॉम्पिटिटर है हमारे, और मेरी वर्ल्ड रैंकिंग 4th चल रही थी और कंपटीशन बहुत ज़बरदस्त था वहाँ पे। लेकिन क्वालिफिकेशन राउंड में जैसी थ्रो लगी और उसके बाद मुझे लगा कि नहीं, ये मेरे लाइफ का सबसे जो तगड़ा मौका है ओलंपिक्स, और ये मैं नहीं छोड़ूंगा। और मुझे लगता है कि अपोनेंट को देख के और कॉम्पिटिटर को देख के कभी भी घबराना नहीं चाहिए, और ये मैंने एक्सपीरियंस किया है मेरे पहले ओलंपिक में।
बड़े बड़े चैंपियनों को अपने सामने देखा बिल्कुल। 2008 में जब मैं आया था शुरुआत में तो सुशील कुमार का मेडल आया था, 2012 में योगेश्वर दत्त और सुशील दोनों का आया, तो उनका मेडल था मेरे सामने। तो मैं भी देखता था कि इनका इतना सम्मान मिलता है, तो बहुत खुशी होती थी देख के, भाई मेरे को भी ऐसा करना, अगर मैं ऐसा करता हूँ तो मतलब देखो कितना सम्मान मिलेगा।
इंडिया आके मतलब इतना अच्छा लग रहा है, सबका इतना प्यार है। हमारा बस यही कोशिश रहेगा कि आगे भी ऐसे देश के लिए मेडल लाते रहूं और देश का नाम रोशन करते रहूं।
Earlier in the day, Indian contingent from Tokyo Olympics campaign were greeted to a huge reception in New Delhi as they made their way out of the airport. Javelin star and gold medalist Neeraj Chopra was the star attraction. Neeraj was actually struggling to go through the crowd as everyone wanted to catch a glimpse of the javelin gold winner. Thousands of fans waited outside the airport to welcome wrestlers Ravi Kumar Daya and Bajrang Punia, boxer Lavlina Borgohain, and the men's hockey team who arrived from Tokyo in the day. Bureau Report, DD India.
Now take a look at what else has been making news across the country as well.
Assam CM Himanta Biswa Sarma on Monday met Prime Minister Narendra Modi in the national capital. The Chief Minister discussed developmental issues and appraised the Prime Minister about the situation on the Assam-Mizoram border. NIA conducts raid at multiple locations in Jammu and Kashmir. The raids come day after the Jammu and Kashmir administration sacked 11 of its employees, including sons of Hizbul Mujahideen chief Sayyid Salahuddin and 2 from the police department, for allegedly working as overground workers for terrorist organizations. The government has opened up vaccination for foreign nationals. They are now eligible to jab in India and can register on the CoWIN portal using their passports. A flood-like situation was witnessed in the part of Uttar Pradesh as heavy rain pounded several districts. Hundreds of villages are inundated with water, and Bundelkhand region is the worst hit. Rivers in various parts of the states are flowing above the danger level.
And that's all we have for the moment in this edition of Newsnight Tonight. But before we go, we leave you with these images of wildfires across the Greek island of Evia. Now, as breathtaking as these images might seem, do stop and think about where our actions are taking us as far as global warming is concerned. Have a good night.